Okay, so Mr. Jennis, with that, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes in your opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair. The material facts of this case have already been laid out in the House. I am happy to repeat them in response to questions, but I'll use my opening statement to instead make some specific arguments about what we can learn from this situation. Generally speaking, we expect a high level of secrecy when it comes to national security. While in a free democracy, people should generally have access to information about what the government is up to, information pertaining to national security is closely guarded because it could be used against us by adversaries. On the other hand, it is a well-established principle of national security that information must be shared with citizens if they need that information to defend themselves. For example, if we were at war and a particular area faced imminent bombardment...
Mr. Jennis, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I'm just hearing from translators that your pace is a little bit quick.
Okay.
So if you could just slow it down, and I'll be generous in terms of making sure that if that costs 30 seconds, that in order for the well-being of translators to be adhered to, we offer that to you. Yes, Ms. Romanato?
On that same note, I understand that Mr. Duncan had requested that witnesses provide their speaking points in advance of the meeting. Were they provided to us? I'm not sure if the interpreters have them.
I don't know the answer to that, Ms. Romanato. They were. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Jennis, I've stopped the clock. You've got 4 minutes, 15 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your indulgence. On the other hand, it is a well-established principle of national security that information must be shared with citizens if they need that information to defend themselves. For example, if we were at war and a particular area faced imminent bombardment, we would expect the government to warn citizens of the attack so that they could shelter themselves. We would not expect government to keep that information secret, obviously. If a terrorist planted a bomb in a building, we would expect that the building be immediately evacuated, not that the government would keep the information secret simply because the information involved security. What is obviously true of physical attacks should, based on an extension of the same principle, also apply in the more benign cases of cyber and other kinds of foreign attacks. The principle remains that the victim or potential victim has a natural right to know so that they can defend themselves. But moreover, foreign interference is a particular case where exposure is a central part of the solution. The impact of foreign disinformation is significantly reduced when people become aware of the source, because in this way it is exposed as propaganda and loses its persuasive power. Foreign takeovers of institutions can be undone in their impact simply through exposure, and politicians who are identified as foreign collaborators are less likely to be re-elected. When people are aware that the source of something is a hostile foreign state, that awareness may dissolve the impact of the threat. The current government has used national security as an excuse for keeping secret information related to foreign interference that it actually would be in the national interest to expose, where exposing that information would protect victims and reduce the overall impact. Three known examples of this phenomenon are the secrecy that long surrounded the Winnipeg lab documents affair, the failure to inform members of Parliament of threats against them or their family, which resulted in 2 separate questions of privilege recognized by the Speaker, and the current insistence of the government on keeping secret the names of parliamentarians who have intentionally collaborated with hostile foreign states. It is hard to see how the public interest was or is served by secrecy in any of these cases. When it comes to foreign interference, we should be strategically declassifying certain information precisely as a tool to fight against interference. The government's defense of their failure to inform me of threats against me was that they told the House of Commons about these threats and that they respect the role of the House of Commons as a separate institution from the executive. In response to this, I would make 5 observations. First, as you know, I was targeted at my personal email, and House of Commons IT were informed about attacks on parliamentary accounts. So I suspect administration here wasn't even informed of the attack on me because it had nothing to do with their jobs. Secondly, we have still not heard clear testimony regarding what information exactly was shared with House IT and when, whether it was merely technical details or the full robust picture that had been shared with our intelligence services by the FBI. Without the full picture, it would have been hard for us to be briefed. Thirdly, the government's argument seems to badly misunderstand the nature of the work expected of IT professionals. House of Commons IT are not an intelligence or communication service. They work on IT. It would seem strange in principle for those IT professionals to have decided of their own accord to walk about the building and talk to parliamentarians about the threats they face. Fourthly, CSE acknowledged in their testimony that there were likely caveats associated with the information shared that prevented House of Commons employees from resharing the information without permission. I would suggest that the committee send for more and clearer information about what exactly was shared with House of Commons IT services, when, and with what caveats. And finally, the underlying logic of the government's argument for secrecy is deeply flawed, because the rights and privileges of members of Parliament are vested in them as members of Parliament. Those rights are what enable us to do our jobs for our constituents. Those rights can be given up or modified by the agreement of the House, but they are not held, controlled, or modifiable by House administration. The way to respect the rights and independence of members of Parliament is to give them the tools and the information that they need. The government's argument here implies that House administration is the holder of our rights as opposed to members themselves, and that is, of course, dead wrong. Chair, that's my opening statement, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jennis.